Why not? It's like, otherwise it's kind of weird, isn't it? No, it's
There's many reasons.
maybe not that very cool.
You're going to go behind the switcher. You're going to go here. No, I think the mic is for
this.
For this.
Yeah.
So can we start? We need to turn it on.
There we go.
It's working.
Thank you very much for coming, and I think to the second edition of Curatorial Conversation. So just chill. We just chat, and if you have any points you want to make, just put your hand up, and we can open the floor at any time. Now, before we start, I thought I'll just show you something which is almost happening at the same time. This is in London. The Hong Kong IA is currently having an exhibition as part of the London Architectural Festival. So there is a team of curators who curated an exhibition about architecture. And our president, our Hong Kong IA president, was there just now opening the exhibition. It's interesting in that it's actually held at the Building Centre, where one of our curatorial advisor, Peter Murray, is based, guy who started the London Festival of Architecture. So he's also one of our international curatorial advisors for this Biennale. So one of the, and you will also know that the Hong Kong IA is also organising another exhibition at LA to promote the sort of architecture and urbanism in Hong Kong, in LA. So that's on its way. So I don't know, maybe Curatorial Conversation number 65 will be with those two sets of curators to talk about their experience. So watch this space. I'll just stop that for the time being. Thank you. For this particular one, Laura and I've known Laura for a while, and I'm very pleased to have Laura joining us today. And there's no agenda, but there are a couple of questions, leading questions I'd like to start off the conversation with Laura. One of the things that I amongst various roles you've had, one of the things I want to ask you is about your role as a advisor to the mayor in London. I think that can you explain a little bit of what the design panel and explain what exactly it is?
So when Mayor Sadiq Khan came into power, he decided to overrule the old kind of almost one-on-one relationship that the previous mayor had with some advisors who were all middle-aged men, white. And he decided to open up and create what he called the Mayor Design Advisory Panel. And so I was one of those in my previous life when I was still living in London before moving back to Hong Kong. And it was a very diverse panel, 50-50 male-female, very different ethnic backgrounds, very different professional backgrounds, not just architects and designers, but also people from the activist side, artists, engineers, so a much more diverse panel. And our role was basically threefold. One was to help at design reviews, which is the more kind of classical role that we architects and designers have had in the past. So you just go and examine a project and just critique it, like at architecture school. So, and you try not to trash the person, but you try to bring something constructive to the conversation. The other part to that role was advocacy, so going out there and promoting good design and reaching out in general and explaining what design thinking and design can do for society, really. And then the third one was a bit more boring in my sense, but you do need it, was to come up with new guidelines and new, not regulations, but guidelines. So design guidelines, etc., and help local authorities to implement those, and move those forward. Basically, that was it.
Well,
And have lots of dialogue and lots of debate and lots of crossovers, which didn't quite happen before. So really exciting.
there were a few reasons why I asked that. First of all was our mutual friend Hiro Aso passed by Hong Kong, and he was also one of that panel, I believe, and that triggered this thought, but that was just by the by. But secondly, it's that, well, actually, this is exactly what we want to do in our Biennale. In that dialogue, is a good thing. That's just one of the things that we're doing now. And second thing is advisory panels. In that, we want to engage the public. So the exhibition starts between December and ends in February, but we would like to do some public engagement beforehand. So it's not just an exhibition, and during the exhibition, so that naturally to engage the public who come and visit. But also, we would definitely have some sessions where would be not necessarily critique, but possibly actually we were talking to different universities, and they're quite interested in the idea of actually having public reviews, real public reviews on the ground. So maybe some of the projects are even set in Chunwan and so on. And so this is exactly what we want to do. We wouldn't go as far as saying that we would affect the policies or design guidelines, but if the legacy of the exhibition is a set of public views about how things ought to be, can be, should be, want to be, or imagine it to be, then that's great. Then the Biennale Foundation or Hong Kong could say, well, Mrs. Government, this is what, or it's a start of something. I think the other thing being, we don't have a mayor in Hong Kong, do we?
No, because we're a city-state, so part of it.
Let's explore that a little bit, because I think it's interesting, because another theme of the Biennale is that, well,
for a long time I thought Carrie Lam was our mayor when she was development bureau.
That's actually interesting. When she was the development, the head of the
it really felt like we had a mayor.
We've got to be careful. I mentioned her names in a forum a week ago, and I got trashed.
Really?
Yeah, because I kind of mentioned her in a slightly positive light, and that was the end of that. But I declare that I'm neutral politically first.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, she's done some good things, and she's done
in that
some,
role.
Yeah. But it's interesting because it reflects. No, just go back slightly. The Biennale, we for a very long time, the Biennale is all kind of very high, well, not sort of relatively highbrow, in that we want to kind of change that slightly and also open it broader, not just for the professionals, but for the other people who live in that city, who may not look at the world in the same way. It's just kind of built kind of manifestation. But the softer side, the policies, the legal framework, the financial framework, so everybody's involved, the lawyers, the QS, not just the QS, but accountants and all, these are, they all contribute to our futures. Insofar as in the UK, where both of us spend a lot of our time, there is a thing called, as you said, local authorities. In the local authorities, there is this thing called a planning department. In the planning department, there is a planning committee where it's made out of butchers, candles makers, and the likes.
Yeah. And the conversations are really fun.
There are pros and cons about it. I mean, I'm not saying it's best, but I've had projects where, we've been asked to do pastiche, from the planning. But it's a challenge. But it's a view. It's a view by the people who use the city. And they're elected. And if they don't perform, they won't get elected next time. So there's pressure for them to represent. But where do we stand here?
Well, we are opposite a bureaucracy who tick boxes.
No, but
and we
it's
have
interesting.
a lot of practice notes that we have to go through and make sure that, ourselves we tick our own boxes that we think we've interpreted. But we don't have that dialogue with an end user, or at least someone who's been elected by that end user, and who tells us, well, actually, you know what, in my street, I would like to get rid of the railings, and then I would like more trees, and can I have more parking spaces? We don't have that
Okay.
that direct interaction.
Let's
We have plot ratios.
absolutely,
We have
absolutely. There's where it comes in, because in the UK they have that too. There's building regulations. They're planning kind of. So somewhere along the line in the system,
very vague framework.
Yeah. In the system, there are people who can make decisions at every level, from the planning officer to building regs. You could actually do building regs on a commercial basis. So I know that is. I'm not saying that the Biennale could change all of that in Hong Kong, but let's imagine a little bit. You know, as a platform, I think we should open up that we should have a discussion about the kind of policy framework. It's would a
By the way, can I ask a question? In
Yeah.
this room, who actually works on or works on the built environment in Hong Kong? I'm not talking rest of Asia, but like really in Hong Kong.
Is it a hands-up thing or?
I don't.
Is it like half hand? Because I did up till recently. Half hand.
Yeah, of course, on and off.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like the idea of a mayor in Hong Kong. Let's say, yeah. If there's a mayor, you know, at what level? I mean, you know, the chief executive is probably has got too many things on his or her plate. Development Bureau. Okay, well, when Carrie was the head of the chief Development Bureau, the the secretary for development, she did a lot of good things. She did a lot of, you know, at least she stood up for
She
a
did
few
things.
things. Yeah, she did things. It seems that would have been quite a good place to start. No?
Yep, that would be you know the most Hong Kong starting point.
But what about something which is more grassroots? I mean, do you think it would not necessarily to have?
You mean an elected?
Let's say we have a body. We have let's say we have a quasi-governmental body. Because if you have any governmental bodies, it's kind of the trust is not there. Let's say, have you come across a thing called the trust barometer? No, it's interesting. Look it up. Is a study done by somebody called a firm called Adamant, PR company. What they did was for many years they looked at different cities. They do surveys about people's trust. It's divided in 4 sectors: government, NGOs, media, and commercial side. And they benchmark it different cities. You know, the trust level, and it's very interesting because I mean, they benchmark cities by cities in terms of the trust between each sector and between each sectors in each
So
city.
name names.
Hong Kong does very badly on all front, actually.
Yeah.
They don't trust the government. They don't trust the
No one
media.
trusts anyone.
And it's interesting because even the NGOs are going downhill a little bit. You know, and so within that framework, you know, let's imagine it a little bit. You know, how would that work in Hong Kong? I know the government is the government. It's almost a dead end to really, because it changes every few years. So after Carrie, Paul Chan was kind of, you know, when he does his thing. But now, Mr. Wong, I don't know his
That's
first
not
name.
a good sign.
But anyway, well, you know, he seems to be a bit more engaged. But still, it's that trust thing isn't there. Is there a?
And I'm not sure that actually, apart from the professionals, which we all are pretty much in this room, anyone knew who was in charge of developing Hong Kong or of the built environment side of Hong Kong. Like if you ask anyone in the street, well, everyone in London knows who the mayor of London is.
Very true.
Yeah.
Well, especially when, yeah. We even call them something buses and something bikes after his name.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's
So you think that a democratically elected person would not work and would not warrant the level of trust?
Well, no, I'm just exploring. For example, we're at Hong Kong IA, right? There's this thing called Joint Institute XYZ, right? That would be potentially one platform. Say, you know, we all professional.
But that person needs powers. That's the problem. You can't just.
Let's put it in another context. Advocacy as another thing that you talked about. Now, how powerful would it be? Would that be a powerful thing? You know, let's forget the term media, but let's say the Hong Kong IA, Hong Kong IP, and a joint institute, which is kind of have who are stakeholders of the built environment. Actually, I mean that broadly because, as I said, I keep saying, you know, even lawyers and accountants have a say in our cities. You know, we could even be, you know, the legal framework, the financial framework that enable. Let's say there is a joint institute kind of organization which enables that to happen, and it is elected because within that, there, you know, every other term there is an elected president of that organization. The main role.
Okay, I get it. Okay, so it's a body of professionals who elects someone who has a representation role, but what about decision making and real action? Because that's in fact what we liked about Carrie Lam at the time, is that she could say, okay, let's do Kowloon East, go, now.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you know, that's
because representation is all well and good, but at the end of the day, you know, the transformation that Singapore has managed to make in the past 5 years is all action.
Was that an action from top down or bottom up?
In this case, top down.
Right. So it depends on the person at the top, but and unfortunately at this point.
And actually, there's no. I can't identify one person. It's the planning.
Well, yeah, no, it's the regime. It's a whole setup, but unfortunately, we don't have. Well, is it fortunate or unfortunate we don't have government officials here, so we can't. They couldn't make that contribution. But let's explore that a little bit about a slightly more bottom up work. This is more middle, you know, professionals, sort of a middle tier up. So it has an ability or possibility to reach down to the bottom, you know, to engage kind of at the public and generate sort of noise or generate public views. And then it has, from a professional level, it has a means to engage upwards in terms of the policymakers and so on. With that work, I mean, in that point, with a slightly longer term view, to make that as a platform for these views to be expressed in a much more connected way and try and affect change. I know some of this is happening, but I think, you know, ultimately, with, you know, there is this eventually, if this runs, that person, as you said, could be that figurehead, that could have that, you know, it could have things named after him, like, yeah.
Yeah, but for me, it always links back to decision making and action. If you can't, you know, that broad sentence, turn vision into reality. If you can't do that, it's.
I know we on the floor we have.
What do you think?
Yeah, we have people from Melbourne. Do you have a view? Yeah, what's your experience?
Well, I was thinking that there are some elements of structures and power and decision making in Melbourne that are not that far removed from Hong Kong, even though they might seem quite different. And that at various times, this issue about, particularly at times of major change, this issue about how you engage people to make change and create that change can happen from the bottom up. And that I've been involved in a number of projects which have started by assisting communities to think and to think outside of expectations, outside of expected futures, about the kind of futures they would like, and to help them realise that. And to do that in a way which does address this trust thing. One of the most important things that we've discovered in our work is how fantastic it is to have students, university students in our case, involved in this work, because of the trust level when those students go and talk to communities. They're not from government, they're not from corporations, they're not really from universities either, they're students. And people love to help students, so that there is an instant kind of trust. And you can, I think, by envisaging different futures, actually create a pressure from the bottom up to implement, to bring about real changes. And I think there are a number of really important examples of doing that work. Yeah. And something like the support of the Institute of Architects, as we've had in Australia, the support of many professionals has been important, but really starting at a relatively local level to think differently about what is the future that people want, and to visualize what that future could look like. That is, the transformation looks like this now, it could look like this then. Not in blueprint way, not in a way in which this is the future you're going to get, but here's a glimpse of an alternative future. That can be immensely powerful, and I have particular examples where that's changed government strategy dramatically for major projects.
And what was the enabler on the government side? So that link.
Just political pressure, I think. It's
just political pressure.
That you can generate such interest in the possibilities for something being very different that it's
react.
Yes, it's picked up by the press. Images start to appear in the paper. You have exhibitions, big exhibitions on site or around the site, and eventually you can change the existing. Now we do have existing functional agencies for transformation planning, new design, and so on. But really, you can change their direction in that way.
I have just looking around. I mean, I think it's good that we have different background, people from different background in the audience, ranging from I noticed somebody from sort of branding, wayfinding to design institutions, and so on and so forth. So it is a collective effort. Now, we thought about that actually, the public engagement. We thought about things like competitions for students, or even open competitions for people. So part of that is, if we do that, we would have to manage that their output to kind of, we talked about earlier, to put that back into the framework of this year's Biennale. Broadly, the brand is called 2x2. It's divided into three sub-themes: identity, livability, and sustainability, and how, more specifically, potentially, innovation and technology can support the imagination within these kind of three themes. I think the key thing is imagination, because I think technology and innovation are great. On their own, they're meaningless. But if we set the agenda, if we have imagination of our cities, then these things can help us implement it. And also, we talked about earlier that where we pitch it is that our imagination should be not too far ahead of us, so that it becomes science fiction. But it should be close enough to us that it's kind of connected with some of the issues that we're facing now. Without being too controversial, and I must stress that we were looking at contribution that is apolitical. With that caveat, things like Lantau Tomorrow is a hot potato for various reasons. Let's sidestep that kind of political kind of agenda for one thing. Now, what is if there is such a thing called Lantau Tomorrow, or whatever it is, a new neighborhood or a solution that solves a housing problem?
Or go back to the beginning, the real problem, which is affordability, not necessarily supply.
Exactly. So So that's also apolitical, could be. What is our imagination on that? Now, at the end of the day, if we can think of that in those sort of terms, whether it is lent out tomorrow or whether it's whatever scheme it is, these fundamental principles that we apply our imagination on could actually be applied to whatever, even on a big scale, 2,000 by 2,000 square kilometers, or 2 square meter by 2 square meter microsites. Right? Agree?
Sharing apps.
Or sharing apps, or 2 gigabytes by 2 gigabytes, or whatever. Yeah, and I think that's where the our
rooftops.
yeah, well, this is our Biennale. Where we're pitching for at is that, well, there are constraints, there are issues which are very local, which are not, which is not the same as UK, which is not the same as Melbourne, which is not even the same as Macau. But within that framework, we could project ourselves. We mentioned something called the alternative reality. More what it could be, without kind of bogging ourselves too much on some of the sort of policy issues and so on. And I think that's where, I suppose, and how, in your experience working with kind of the mayor, I know it's different because, I mean, it's almost impossible to be political because there's a lot of political agenda. How does this surface in that role, in that kind of context?
Well, the conversations are generally, the broader umbrella is of course politicized because Sadiq's agenda is very social.
Yeah.
So it's all about providing, the best environment for everyone, and that's the kind of the overarching umbrella. But this could be considered apolitical because it's just a basic human rights thing.
Yeah.
To be wanting the best environment for everyone, the best living space for everyone. So in that sense, it's been fairly apolitical.
How about specific projects? Has it ever been used as a kind of a political football for various gains in terms of?
Garden Bridge.
Did you come across the Garden Bridge in your capacity?
Well, the Garden Bridge, it was already a hot potato in Boris's case. So, no, I think it's more of an anecdote. I was more thinking big luxury residential schemes, or larger developments that were put on hold, but not just because, Boris Johnson said yes to that, so now we're going to say no to it. More as what kind of London do we want for the future?
What kind of London do they want for the future? It's a good question. What kind of Hong Kong do we want in the future?
Well, that's the question.
Yeah, I mean that's.
What kind of Hong Kong do you want? Because if
well, the question is also not so much what kind of future do we want.
no, I agree. Yeah.
No. I mean, not even we.
And the younger generation.
Exactly. I mean, we talk about 2030, we talk about 2050. By then, we we pass our retirement time, right? A long past for some. So it's how we, the concept of imagination is just not just about us, but about kind of.
It's actually not about us.
Yeah. So we talk about university students as a good place to start because they have a certain level of connection through the education. How do we engage with the younger generation?
Well, I was thinking about what you said in Melbourne, and I was wondering if the starting point isn't where you live, because that's kind of the essence of who you are. So I wonder if that's the starting point. What kind of lifestyle do you want to have? What kind of spaces do you want to have around you? Because when we say public engagement and we talk about design competitions, it always becomes very abstract because it's generic themes, generic spaces, generic locations. It's not something where you've got a gut feel. well, you know what, I live here. This is what I would really, really, really want.
Very interesting.
Why is it always reactionary then? Because it seems like it's always reactionary. Whereas if it's just, because for me it's more the question of what do you like, not what do you not like.
No,
And
I
maybe
didn't
that's,
say do
you know,
not. I said what do you want.
But everything is kind
do
of,
not want.
I feel like sometimes it's hard for people to engage because people are very like, okay, I have to say something bad now about something. But you just say,
When you say people, do you mean here or do you mean generally?
citizens. I once did a kind of a workshop with kids, and they're much more kind of, what do you like about this, you know? And then you get, okay, I like that, and then I do a big slide, and you know, and I just feel like there's some kind of scaling that's, you know, rather than asking, what is it you don't like about Hong Kong? What is it you love about Hong Kong? What is it that makes Hong Kong?
I don't like. It was more of a
No, it's not me
gut
kind
feel
of.
relationship with
Yeah.
I kind of understand what you're saying because I mean I think it's particularly a problem here in Hong Kong in that you know you even if you have an open question, what do you think? And 9 out of 10 times you get what they don't like. They'll tell you what they don't like, what they don't want because it's a very reactionary.
but at least it's a starting point.
It is a starting point.
It's a starting
And how do we how you know I have a particular take on this in that it's to do with our education, it's to do with our the way we teach kids from the age of 3 that they all taught to give the right answer. They're all taught that there's one formula to get the right answer. And it actually manifests itself even at university levels when we teach design. They ask you, they ask the tutor for what's the answer. And in a way, it's very hard for this is the way I look at it. I mean, it might not, you know, it's just one perspective. And I think it's the idea of not being afraid to give the wrong answer because there's no right answer. You know, when we ask you to think, when we ask you to have imagination, who's to say that imagine? You know, if you don't imagine to go on to, you know, that you can go on to go to the moon, for example, you know, you would never do it. You know, because you know, at the time there was no technology to support it. At the time there was no innovation about, you know, sort of what to do that. And I think we should, you know, if we could apply that, we could encourage people to kind of chill. You know, there's no wrong answer. I think that's the key.
So designers, we're all used to kind of coming up with new solutions to things. But, you know, guys that you want to engage, that you're talking about now, discussing with, they don't know, like, you know, it's not kind of trained, they're not trained kind of visionaries. It's just kind of fundamentally making more of what's good about something. It might be a good start, you know?
So what do you think is good about Hong Kong?
Yeah, where do people spend their time, you know? Well, how do you make more places for people to engage, more places for people to be, you know, nicer places for people to shop? I mean, yeah, if it is shopping malls, then how do you link that to a better place to be, you know? It's not so enclosed, perhaps. Better daylight, I don't know.
It's interesting you say that because that is almost like a circular conversation because, you know, quite a lot of the times when we ask people what do you want, a lot of times they come back, we don't want any more shopping malls, we don't want any more high-end shops. Well, actually, you kind of, there's a good point you're saying, well, if that is what, not necessarily they don't want, I mean, that's the norm, you know, shopping. Yeah, what can we make better shopping malls? Why can't we make better, you know, how can we make that better? I mean, how can we, or in a way that conversation actually is broader because it's not just about the designers, it's about the people who commission shopping malls, but the people who kind of say, well, I'm a developer, I want to come to you, Mr. Architect, to give me a shopping mall. The brief shouldn't be just square, you know, sort of return for investment, not just in terms of square meterage, but also a social return for investment. I think it should be, in a way, if we were going back to our conversation earlier, the efficacy and also the policy, the design guideline should have those factors in it. In that, yeah, well, you know, how do you measure? I mean, Hong Kong's great at measuring things. How do you measure the social return for investment?
Lots of cities have been really good at that.
Great, let's hear about them.
You know, Auckland has been doing fantastic at doing that. Melbourne, Sydney, Melbourne more actually, even more. Singapore even these days.
Why aren't we doing it? We, as in,
Good
you know.
question. Good question. There's nothing.
Is it because they don't know? Is it because it's not ultimately measurable in terms of dollar signs?
It is actually measurable in dollar signs.
So
Actually, it is.
demonstrably.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I even see developers in this house today. Why aren't we doing it? I mean, I'm not pointing that direction particularly, but it's surely, if that's demonstrated that works.
Maybe we are.
Hmm?
Maybe we are doing that.
I don't know. Maybe we are. I mean,
So Laura, how are we measuring the ROI then? I'm curious. I really don't know how is that measured.
So it's not measured on a building by building or block by block.
So how's it monetary?
So so for example, more open space. So you can measure the increased value of the property, of the land,
Right,
of the
using
sales value of the
property
flat,
value
and
to-
then the government can measure
So
the decrease in heart disease in this area and the less pressure on hospital bills and healthcare costs, etc., etc. So that's the kind of measure we have. Hard facts. But it's not, of course, it's not on an ROI basis. You can't just, all right, my GDP. You have to measure it more holistically. Otherwise, you lose the.
it's interesting because it's not well, it's measurable.
And it is measurable in other things. So, for example, Amsterdam, they've been reducing Amsterdam and also Copenhagen. Say they've been reducing the amount of vehicular streets, and now they're going even further. They're reducing the amount of car park in city centres, and they're measuring now the gain through retail revenue in central areas and sales values in central areas, and less pressure on government spending because they don't have to maintain the streets as much, and they have less pollution and less cases of obesity and whatever. So those are other facts that you can measure.
You see, on the one.
And more trust.
I know,
You
but
can
I
measure.
no, but I think property prices are high enough. Do we really want to encourage?
but-
No, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. I
Yeah,
I think what actually interesting is that the property price is one thing, but in a way the other measurable bits are slightly more social contribution. In that it is to do with the slightly broader than that
They're
particular.
social, but they're also monetary because you pay them with your taxes.
True.
So they are measurable in dollar signs.
Yeah.
They are very social, and at the end of the day, the objective is social. You want your population to be happy. You want people to be coming to your city. You want them to be working in your city, so that your companies can make a lot.
But also, if we think about this, in a way, even without the dollar sign, these are almost common sense, no?
Yeah, they are basic human rights.
And it's just that in this kind of an environment that we live in here, that everything has to kind of have a dollar sign attached to it to grab people's
But
attention.
the issue is not that it has to have a dollar sign attached to it, is that this dollar sign benefits a certain
Sectors of
sector.
the,
Yeah.
the society.
Yeah.
Correct. I want to open the discussion up to the floor. If anybody has any kind of, it could be anything about the Biennale. I mean, it could be something that's got nothing to do with what we've talked about, because I think.
Have you confirmed to people locations?
I think some people have been. There are people who've been here before, like Louise. And Jason. The location is Chunwan. It is in the mill. So if you haven't been to the mills, go and have a look. I mean, it's
It's really nice.
yeah, and you know, on the one hand, we like, because this is there, we like to engage with the local community more. So a certain part of the Biennale will be more very Chunwan specific. But obviously, it's a Biennale for Hong Kong, so it's got a slightly broader size. So that's why I want to, deliberately introduce some of the big topics about Lantau tomorrow in this conversation. And we're not afraid of addressing those. We're not afraid of hearing views about those, as long as it's kind of in context with our curatorial statement, which is really to have imagination about the way our identity, our livability, and our sustainability of the city. So we would also, because it's a bi-city biennale, that's why 2x2 starts from, but it has a lot of layers of meaning, the 2x2. As a city, we are, we're good at kind of managing the cross-cultural kind of exchange between East and West. We are, and also it is a city for things happen very quickly. You can connect people like there's no tomorrow, and I think that's something that we do very well, both physically and potentially digitally in the future. So and also is a bi-city biennale, so it happens at the same time as Shenzhen. Only biennale in the world that happens. So this year the Shenzhen side, the site is in Futian, so right next to the high-speed rail station. So although ours the mills isn't, but we would have a satellite site in correspondence to that. So ideally it will be in the station. If not, it will be in West Kowloon in the region. So we're working on that. So who knows? Maybe you can visit 2 biennale in one day. So that would be a world first. We might even, if we're lucky, we might even get a train specially for that. Imagination, dream on, yeah, right? So, yeah.
Roger, actually, first time join this conversation.
Yeah.
But will you consider to carry this talk, discussion to another field, not just architect or planner, to other discipline like policymakers, like the lawyers, is it surveyors? I think you should. If we're talking about imagination, right? I think it's a collaborative work. It's not just.
Sure. This is precisely what we're talking about. I think one of the things that our appeal, our audience, the Biennale's audience, are not just about talking about exhibition, but also the pre-events like this one. This is the second curatorial conversation. Probably, I don't know, once every month, once or twice every month if there is. I call our audience future cities builders. These are not just architects or designers, accountants, lawyers, engineers, whatever you, teachers. I think this conversation. I mean, look around today. We see people from the publishers. We see people from, as I said, designers, different disciplines of designers and universities and so on. So I think it's a beginning, but maybe curatorial conversation number 55, just before the opening, could be a much broader than this. I don't know, but I think that's the plan. Now, if anybody would like to host one of these in your premises, with an audience which is a lot more diverse than this, we would be happy. And I think that the Institute of Architects is also happy to host, or to open this place up to a broader audience. How many of you have never been up here before? Yeah. Well, there's always a first. But I think some architects have never even up here before, apart from having to pay for their subscription. That's beside the point. So. Connections is also the thing about talk about this idea about Hong Kong being a place of connections, 2x2. You make connections. You have no idea how this crossing, these it comes up to 2x2 could be a million, could be a million possibilities, because 2x2 could be a lot of different things. And I always said that there is a saying about 6 degrees of separation, but in Hong Kong is about 1. You always know somebody who knows somebody who could just connect like tomorrow, and that's how it happens. We a lot of days we talk about smart cities, but smart cities is all the legal framework and all the sort of financial framework that enables it. It's not about just the built environment. We need to work. I mean, I say this in Hong Kong. I think I might get kind of booed off because I think you know, architects think that we can do everything, but we can, but we can't. I mean, we're not.
We can help.
We can help. Yeah, we can help.
We can
But
help a lot.
well, you know, there's this kind of view about architects' role has been diminishing and so on and so forth. But you know, long gone are the days that we are the Renaissance man. But we're good at making the connections. We're good at making things happen. We're good at kind of have an overall view. And all our trainings has been to do with kind of understanding the problem and knowing who can actually leverage a certain kind of knowledge and expertise to turn it into a built environment. And I think that's our role. I mean, it's not about diminishing role, but it's about kind of, you know, doing what we're doing best and have a very broad views of the world.
Yeah, basically finding solutions. That's what design is.
Yeah, and actually, interestingly,
And beautiful. They need to be beautiful.
they need to be beautiful, and I think, yeah,
Beautiful solution.
we had the last curatorial conversation with Tim Stoner. He mentioned something that's very close to his heart. There's a sort of things like working with a design council in the UK about this design thinking, the idea about how it's another topic, kind of hot topic in Hong Kong, design thinking. Everybody talks about design thinking. Well, you know, we live design thinking. We kind of, you know, we don't have
Which
this.
is basically common sense.
Yeah, we don't even
beautiful
have.
things that people love.
We don't think.
Like, yeah, okay.
But we do design thinking, but actually, funny enough, it's not like that. In that, I think the design council, they kind of analysed it. What is it that we do that's kind of encapsulates this design thinking? Using it's like it calls it a double diamond thing. You know, in that you have a problem, then you start thinking about a million different solutions, so it pans out. And then our task is kind of refining that into a few fundamental questions. So it's almost kind of cut out the noise and then really distilled it into something that then gets you focused on what the real problem, the problem that needs to be solved are. And then it opens up, because then you find different solutions for those very specific solutions, things that need to be solved. And then the other diamond, you come back down again, because then you know, the million solutions, you might want only 2 or 3 is suitable, and then you refine it. So this idea of double diamond is a kind of quite interesting sort of thought process, but obviously it's an iterative process, it's not a linear one. So, you know, again, you know, it's one of those things, design thinking, what is it? You know, we live and breathe it, but maybe not.
Oh, George, I just wanted to maybe share like a personal experience.
Absolutely.
So I am an architect, and I've now stepped away from design completely and gone into real estate consulting. And you talk about, Laura, you talk about solutions and you talk about, you know, getting into the mindset to identify opportunities for solutions. And like, although I don't do design anymore, I actually feel more creative than I ever was, which is quite interesting. Being an architect actually made me look at the final product as a built form. But I didn't really have to look after people who had to use the space. And now, doing consulting, I actually get into the people's mind a lot more. So.
No, I mean that's absolutely. I mean, I think in a way you know you fall.
I think Jordan nailed it actually.
Yeah.
Because you know what's not missing, but
Architects are not creative.
No, they are. We all are. But what's not missing, but implied in your double diamond thing is the
Not
dialogue.
mine, the design council.
Is the dialogue with users that happen in the diamond explosion phase.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
it's that thing that we've been used to doing as professionals because we have to. We have no choice. We are the channel. Everyone comes to us and says, okay, I need this, I need this. Oh yeah, but by the way, I need to achieve this. And also please mind the structure and do this and do that. And you're that channel and you bring back the diamond to, okay, option 1, option 3, option
65.
2, option 65. Okay, people focus, please choose 1.
Yeah.
And then I say, yeah, but.
Now is actually what I see more important and actually more pragmatic in the way that, you know, before people say, I need this, I need that, we invite them to step back and say, do you really need this?
or why do you need that? I think it's
why, you know, asking them why a lot more, right? You know, get them to really think, you know, like we help a lot of corporate occupiers into different spaces. And people say, I need this, I need an office with this size, but why? Okay, what are you doing? You know, we're inviting people to really take a step back. Whereas in my days as an architect, you know, we get given a brief. We don't question the brief. Okay, we get given a brief to design a space for, you know, whatever reasons. We don't really question the brief. And I just feel like, you know, now I'm being more creative, not on the drawing board kind of, you know, medium. I'm actually more creative because I'm actually in a position that I can not challenge, but, you know, put it back out there. Like, does this really make sense? Because you give us a brief because the way that you've been using the space for the last decade. Now we are going forward. You're still giving us the same brief. And does that make sense? Because things change, right? So as an architect, like I just never felt like we were in a position to kind of challenge the brief too much. Even if we challenge the brief, we're challenging with these senior stakeholders. Like we're challenging with people who are paying for the job. We're not bringing that conversation to people who are going to use the space, right? Ultimately, it's about, you know, we talk about people engagement and all that. We engage people at the start, and then we're not engaging the right people, and therefore once we build the space sometimes still left empty because that conversation hasn't gone all the way through.
That's where your engagement. That's exactly what we should be doing.
Exactly. I mean, I think. Thank you, Trudy. I mean, you probably said it better than I did, but you know that's why I think the way we look at the Biennale is in the same way that you know, left to our own devices, we'll just be an exhibition of things that we receive as well that matches. But we're interested in the kind of generating section than the generated section. So this conversation is a good example, and also, you know, when we talk to universities about engaging them, we don't want them just to give us the product, you know, the students' work, but you know, use a platform, you know, to talk to the local people, you know, to talk to the district councillor. So we use this as a platform to, you know, talk to consultants, you know, that you know, there are methods, there are ways in which kind of just, you know, maybe you kind of think it was bombarding the students with too much, but then that's that diamond, you know, you kind of bombard them with all that, but they only need to focus in one or two things, and then they can actually go and find the real solutions and then give us a beautiful product. I mean, we
and if
you
you
know,
tell them that there's no wrong answer.
well, yeah, no, and also, you know, it's interesting because, you know, we you know, one thing that we've kind of, you know, I think I absolutely identify with you because I don't practice as an architect either. I would say I'm more creative, but I'm certainly looking at the things in a slightly different way. But you know, one of the things.
I finally know what's behind it.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, you're right. I think we all, you know, it's just that we just have been trained to look at things differently, and it could be applied in different ways.
Yeah. Let me talk about a little bit. I'm still an architect, still doing.
Sorry, we forgive you.
That's fine.
I've seen that.
Yeah, I'm still under the creative industry. Then our office also does a lot of placemaking project, engaging the public. Then I heard about like experience from UK, from Australia, from Melbourne. So what kind of, I mean, people that you're engaging? For example, for a particular district, you may engage a local community, right? But then for some of the bigger scale, like okay, let's say Hong Kong, we engage university students, but then they're not part of that local community. So what kind of experience you're having previously for certain part of location, you engage certain part of students with the locals? How actually it was? So to get the real feedback from that particular district.
I mean, I think from on that, I mean, my view is that actually students are very creative in their own ways. Maybe, you know, in that, you know, they have a goal that they need to reach, and they'll find their ways to deal with that. And all we could do, even when we're in the studio, is to show them these are, you know, give them a platform. Say, well, you can look at this, you can look at that. And in that instance, you know, one of the things that we could do the most effectively is to, you know, to engage with the program with the universities or whatever, and
schools.
Or
schools. Two of the best engagement experience I've had in the UK was one weekly weekly design sessions with the local school.
Yeah.
They come in, and then they draw, they model, they, you know, on their local areas. They know which streets we're talking about, and they just go, you know, just unleash. And then at the end, everyone has a chat. Why did you want that? Why did you propose that? What did you like in it? Da 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 da. And some great vocations came out of that.
We could equally provide platform.
And the second one, sorry, the second one was in an area which only has people living around it, not in it, because it's an industrial site, so no one actually lives there. But they were so passionate about that one common that they walked their dogs there, they went running there, and they were so engaged, and we had the whole cross-section from the drunkard to the old lady to the school kid from the Muslim schools nearby, and they all had their say because they loved that particular one space, and they didn't want us to touch it, basically. That was it. And they were like, we love it, you have to keep it, otherwise we kill you. Like, okay, got it.
Yeah, I mean, I think students these days are, you know, I mean, very often, you know, I've been a student before. You know, you kind of very focused on your project. You have a solution you need to solve. But I think we can give a platform, you know, for them to get, in, you know, to at least, you know, maybe even just a conversation like this, you know, then with the local people, with the local butchers, with the local, I won't go as far as drug addicts, but I mean, you know, it's various sections of the, you know, and then they could, you know, they can take whatever they can take away, and then focus. Because one of the things that I've always come across when I was teaching is that they try to solve a bigger problem. They try to, you know, they think that they are the savior. They try and solve the biggest kind of social problem there is, aging population or drug use or whatever. But you know, you kind of start thinking architect of Superman, but it isn't. You know, you need to hone down. You need to set double diamond. You know, what aspect of aging that you can hang your project on. You know, what very specific aspect of, or even hone down to a certain age group of, you know, and then or certain type. Then you can hang your project on, because you know in our limited lifespan, you know, you know, the architecture we create could not probably solve the biggest problem. But if through one very specific demonstration that it can actually work, then it opens up all the different possibilities. And I think, I mean, you know, and then it's very hard to tell them which particular specific ideas that they need to think.
You said there was no wrong answer, and now you're telling them to focus.
No, I'm not telling exactly. I'm not saying that they should focus on that, but they should find the area that interest that they really believe in to focus. There's no wrong answer. Well, I'm focusing in this. You know, we can actually give them 1 million choices to try and find that particular focus that they can really engage. You know, that's the experience I had. We can carry on talking, but I know that we've got work to get back to, some of us anyway. Join us on the next one, Curatorial Conversation number 3. Keep, you know, you're here. That means we have your contact details, so we will spread the news, and you help us spread the news, and have come up with suggestions as well, and both venue and speakers and guests, and you know, I hope to see you guys again and connect. You know, there are people from different sectors here. You know, just network and so on, but also get involved with the Biennale. Either be an exhibitor or be, you know, talk to us about how you want to contribute. Programs, sponsorship, even. You know, we can even take your money if you have. You know, seriously, serious money too. So no, just joking. Thank you very much for coming, and come and enjoy a cup of tea with us or some snacks, and see you again soon. Thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks,